I am now the Reverend Hans Peter Meyer, and I like to use that mostly because it's a reminder to myself to be reverential. Because more and more, at least in my life, it feels like that is the only attitude worth having for me.
Mm.
Now, I'm really happy to have you back talking to you, Ted. So, for anybody who doesn't know, Ted Riter, somebody that I met, it'll be over 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
Ted was teaching with John Wineland then, and Ted's a coach, works with couples on what I'll call sacred sexuality stuff. He's also a rabbi, so he marries couples. And the only reason I have a reverend title is because I trained to marry people and had to get ordained for that. And I, the topic of this podcast is called, or the series of conversations is called Men and Women Talking About Sex and Love. And
Yeah.
We've had a bit of a chat about this. When I started to look at marrying people, I actually lost interest in it just because I feel like, I think as having been married several times, there's a seriousness to it and a weight to it that I think most people aren't aware of until they're well into it, and then it often has consequences for what they think about sex and love. So that was my question to you earlier. Was I'm really interested as somebody who's married a lot of people, as somebody who works with couples, as somebody who talks a lot or somewhat about the spiritual dimension of marriage and of sex. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about men and women, sex and love, and where weddings and marriage and what that mix looks like from your perspective.
Weddings, marriage, and divorce too. I've officiated many divorces as well, which is something within the Jewish community, not necessarily within other faith traditions. But where do you want to start?
Well, I don't know how many years ago you started performing weddings. It's been a few years now, I think.
It was 1996, I think, was the first wedding.
You were a teenager when you started doing this stuff.
I was a kid. I was already married, though. I'd already been married for a few years.
Right.
In fact, my first wedding was, I think, the first wedding I went to. I think I had an older cousin, maybe, who had gotten married or something like that. But yeah, wow. I just stepped right in.
Okay, so let's start with that. So why did you get married when obviously it wasn't like a big deal, it seems like, in your circles? Why did you get married?
Oh, I don't know if it wasn't a big deal. I was just young. I was 21, 22 when I got engaged, something like that. 23 when I got married. And I got married because it just seemed like the right next thing to do.
Okay, now I'm assuming, but correct me if I'm wrong.
That sounds pretty callous. You should probably back it up. That was the next right thing to do, and she was a wonderful person, and there were all these family connections. There were more reasons than that, but it wasn't that all our friends were getting married or something. It was kind of like the next thing you do. You fall in love, you find this person, and then you get married. It was step.
Okay, so my next question is, what changed once you got married? Like, how did actually getting married change your relationship? And specifically your sense of loving this person and also your sexual relationship.
I think we're just jumping right in, huh?
Well, we can take a long time.
I don't know if it changed at first. We were married for over 25 years, or almost 25 years. So, things certainly changed over time. But it took a while. We were still kids when we got married. Mm-hmm. We met in college, got married right before I went and started rabbinical school. Mm-hmm. So that's where it started. I think over the years, what happened is that we became what therapists would say is enmeshed. two separate beings become one, to the point of I don't know where I end and they begin.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when that happens, you lose polarity, that spark that keeps things alive. And a number of other things happen along the way. We faced infertility, we faced real job struggles, and lots of things, both interpersonally and intrapersonally, were happening over the years. And that's not unusual.
No,
Not unusual with
that's
a
kind of what happens when you get married.
it it is, but it doesn't have to be. That's the key. It often is what happens when people think that they don't have to do much work to keep the marriage alive. And we didn't. We thought it was super easy.
Right.
We'd see other people struggling. This is super easy. And what we didn't realize is that sometimes super easy is a mask for here's all this stuff gurgling underneath that I haven't necessarily admitted to myself, you haven't admitted to yourself, and we certainly haven't admitted to each other. Because we don't want to disrupt what's going on. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to take what is or could be fragile and break it, shatter it. Um, and that was a mistake. It's kind of a youthful, we didn't know better.
Yeah.
That we
Well,
you
I
need
think
to
I think
actually have some kind of conversation and sometimes something to churn.
yeah, the churn is kind of so. Like I said, I met you at this two workshops pretty much back to back in 2019. One in Bay Area, one in New York City. And one was called I can't remember what they're called, but they had to do with the polarity, sexual polarity, and my sense of the couples that were there was that at least for a lot of them, it was like it was trying to rediscover that spark thing, and the place that I understand John to teach from, and you as part of that was that we have these polarities, and when we first meet, there's that energy of the polarity,
Mm-hmm.
and that as we spend a lot of time together, we just like putting two magnets in a box together, they depolarize, and we become really comfortable. And some of how I interpreted what you were saying about those years in your first marriage was you get comfortable and you don't want to take the risk of being uncomfortable
Yeah.
because so you make some kind of a deal. And so the couples who were at these workshops that I was at were in some ways wanting to experience, they wouldn't have described it that way, but they wanted to experience some of that discomfort.
Right. Yeah. They I'm sure most didn't describe it as, hey, let's sign up.
Yeah.
Let's go, time and money and energy and all this stuff to be uncomfortable. But they probably were. They may have
Yeah.
loved it. I mean, most love it, but still uncomfortable. But they were brave.
Yeah.
How brave! I love when couples show up, or just one person from the couple, or really just anyone, even on their own, to show up, because so many of these practices are super confronting.
Yeah.
I almost left the first workshop I ever did with John
Mhm.
because it was so confronting. Masculine, feminine energies, like what's this all about? We're all equal, we're all the same, right? And it was enough to say, hey, I don't want any of this. And then afterwards, I went. This was like 2016. After I went back and said, okay, let's study this stuff.
Right. So by this point you've been marrying people. Now what I'm interested in is when people come to you and say, Ted, we want to get married, like do you just say, okay, like just
Poof.
sign up on the schedule here and we'll
Yeah.
or do you make them jump through hoops? Because that's what my inclination was. Like I actually want you to experience some suffering, because if you're not prepared to like even pretend to suffer, then when you get to that place where you're deep into this and you're experiencing, what I have several times is like, oh, like the disappointment. This is really not what I signed up for, and I have
Yeah.
no clue how to get out of it, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I've just got to end it because I don't have a clue.
Yeah, I was certified in a program, I think like in 1995 when I was in rabbinical school, 94 maybe, I don't know, one of those years.
Mhm.
I was ordained in 97, but somewhere along that, it's a 5-year program. Somewhere along that, I was certified in something called Prepare and Enrich, which I think today has a similar name. It's changed a little bit, but it's Prepare and Enrich. It was how do we get ready for marriage? And in there was always the conversation of how do we get ready for the wedding? And the wedding, that's pretty simple. Let's, especially as a Jewish wedding, there's a traditional outline to follow. We can add things to it, massage here and there, but that's actually pretty simple. The marriage, though, that's where it gets complicated, and that's where it gets juicy, and that's where it gets full of possibility. And so that process actually began with a Scantron sheet. Remember those? Number two pencil,
Yeah,
fill
yeah,
in these bubbles,
yeah.
all these questions about finance, about relationships, about sex, all kinds of things were in there, and it would send it off, and this is pre-internet. A couple weeks later, we get the results spit out into this document, and we'd work from that. Oh, okay, here's what came up, and then we would teach all kinds of different communication styles, and so yeah, from the very beginning, I always treated it as all right. There's some steps to take.
Mhm.
In fact, there was only one time that I ever did a wedding without meeting the couple. It was really an unusual circumstance. It was someone who was just moving back to Israel or something like that. I don't remember what it was, and I really didn't enjoy it. I went to the wedding. I got the information. I knew their names and just a
Yeah.
very little bit about them. And this was, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years after I had been ordained. It was the first time I had done it. It was the last time I did it because I didn't. It just felt empty.
Mhm.
I did my job. I'm sure it was a lovely wedding experience for the people who were there. But what was important to me was I was investing my time and love and energy into these couples. And there was something really that I loved that was just really beautiful about helping them get through some of their blockages and helping them find new ways to communicate and have new understandings and agreements and dreams.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was almost 30 years ago, and I had been married already for a couple years and certified and all that stuff, and I don't think I knew what I was talking about. I mean, I did, but I've learned so much in the last 30 years about what it really means to be committed to someone, what it really means to be married, what that looks like, the challenges that come up, the ways to work through those challenges, the ways to make a real mess of everything. I've learned, I've done a lot of that stuff, both the beautiful ways and the messy stuff. And so yeah, my coaching or chaplaincy work or rabbiing for couples looks a lot different than in the 90s for sure.
So, so do couples who you've married, do some of them come back to you for coaching in their marriage?
They do.
Nice. Yeah,
Some come back for tune-ups.
nice. That must feel great.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's been so many years that now I see, some of these people on Facebook that I'm still connected with, and I see now their kids are getting married. And the kids, I sometimes I name those kids. We did baby namings
Mhm.
for them and things like
Right.
that. So it's really pretty profound. It's a huge honor to be that, to play that role in their lives.
So I'm going to come back to the question that I asked you earlier, and maybe with regard to some of these couples. When I know a lot of people who have chosen not to get married, not to have a wedding, and not to be legally married.
Hmm.
And most of the time, there was their comment is, "Well, we've been together for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. Like, why would we do that? What would change?"
Hmm.
And then but there are other people who've actually done that, or who have been together for a lot of years and then decided to get married and have told me like something changed. I'm curious if you've had that experience with people saying that to you, and whether you have any observations about that. What changes, and again, specifically with around these words that I'm throwing out there, like men and women, sex and love. Like,
Mm. Um, Something changes. I'm not sure I could necessarily pinpoint exactly what it is,
mhm,
but what I do hear from people who've been together for many years or engaged for many years is that when they get married, when they have, and I'm going to use marriage kind of broadly. There's marriage that is, or that is certified by the state. There's some people who just have a commitment ceremony of some sort that's maybe in some states is a common law marriage, but is not legally accepted everywhere. Um, but when they make that commitment to each other, something does change. And I don't know, maybe there's always an out. Before a public commitment is made, and not just on Facebook, in relationship kind of thing. Although there's
yeah,
a level of that as well that makes it very real. There is something that changes. There's no longer this we can escape.
mhm,
um, and so yeah, I see that happening. How does it impact um, how does it impact sex and love? It totally depends. um, I think more so what we're talking about is just really committed to each other. You know, once we're really committed to each other and we stop the energy of dating, then what happens? Then what happens to our sex life? Then what happens to our commitment to each other? Then what happens to our trust with each other? Then what happens to just the energetics that we're moving back and forth between each other? Are we still trying?
mhm.
Am I still going to get a haircut and working out and bringing flowers and all these things? Um, and a lot of people don't, men and women.
Mhm.
Right? I got what I wanted. Now I'm gonna focus on other things, and people do that to the detriment. To the detriment. And what happens typically is they kind of just stumble along, fizzle out. They might stay together, but not from this place of, hey, we really feed each other in this relationship, but more from the place often of, well, this fits, right? It's our pattern, it's our lifestyle. Let's not rock the boat. But as we see, across North America, the divorce rate is pretty high. So a lot of people do say, thank you, and or maybe not so nice, thank you, and move on,
Yeah.
move on. So what I'm saying though is that whether or not someone has a ring is not always the indicator of the life that exists within that relationship. And when I say life, like the things that enliven you, and certainly a sexual polarity, a sexual passion is one of those. And can I give you just a little demonstration?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Please.
These handy new business cards I have, which are kind of fun. Um, so when we're meeting, one's here and one's here, and if we're too far, like there's no connection, right? If we get close, we start to get this electricity between us. That's what we call sexual polarity. What happens though is we have this yearning, like, I want to know you better. I want to know you better. Like, I want to hear about your kid, your childhood. I want to hear about your dreams. I want to feel you. You're my soulmate. And so these things become boom. They become one. But once it becomes one, I don't know where I end and you begin. And that causes a couple problems. One is that, and therapists will say we're enmeshed. If I don't know where I end and you begin, then for one, I don't know what boundaries are. And if I don't know what boundaries are, I have to kind of stifle myself. I have to pull back because I don't want to hurt you, right? So if I don't know where your boundary is, I need to pull back or I risk blowing over it. So there's a problem in that sense. There's also the problem in the sense that when we become one, can't differentiate, we lose a sexual passion. And you can think about it this way: I don't want to have sex with myself. I mean, there's masturbation and all kinds of things that are really healthy practices, but I don't like see myself and like, oh, I'm alive.
Yeah.
When our partner becomes us, we often lose that sense of yes. And so the the direction is to say, how can we take this, anticipate it coming here, but pull back a little bit or move through a little bit, right? It doesn't really matter where it is, but we want a little bit of off-centeredness so it doesn't come totally apart, but it just keeps that arc, that electric arc alive.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of sexual polarity 101.
So there's a teacher, Stephen Jenkinson, who has interesting things to say about performing weddings, but also marriage just generally has as an interesting cultural, historical kind of look at it. But one of the things one of the ideas that I quite liked that he brought up was the idea of the stranger. So historically, it wasn't that many generations ago where I would not have even known who I was going to marry, or
Mm-hmm.
the wedding would have been arranged somehow,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and my people would not have known her people. So the wedding would have been a place, and he has this, he calls attention to the aisle. The aisle wasn't just, when you go to a wedding ceremony, often they say, "Are you with the family of the
Right,
party of the
grim, right.
bride or the party of the groom?" Right? And he says this isn't some kind of weird thing. This is like at some point you wouldn't know the other party. You're being invited to something of the bringing together of two bloodlines or two political units or two somethings, and you might not feel safe. You would need that aisle between you to be with your people. And then he talks about the way we are with strangers. So there is the tradition of having the living room that nobody lives in because it's reserved for the special guests.
Mm-hmm.
The silverware and the china that only comes out when there's the special guests. And his point is that with strangers, and this goes back to you made a comment about we're no longer dating and now we're going to get married. But I think when we're in dating, we're often in best behavior. We're often, and his point is when we meet strangers, we want to give them the best. We want to show them the best of who we are. So yeah, we're getting our haircut, we're trimming our beard, we're working out, we're eating right, we're doing good things for ourselves because we want to be the best that we are for this other person, hopefully. So when I talk to people who are getting married, what I'm really interested in is how are you going to sustain the space of the strange for them to be strangers. This goes so for me. The rituals we use, in the various wedding rituals and stuff like that. You talked about, you we get married and then we think we got what we want and then we just kind of we just relax and build our career or whatever we're doing, go fishing, I don't know. And I'm really curious about like the rituals that we can use to maintain that sacred space where we're both strangers, where we're other, and we have to. Okay, I actually am interested in you. Like I don't know everything about you. Like there's so much I don't know about you, but I've gotten to a point where I've lost interest, or I've got what I want, so I'm not going to ask that question. So I have to, how do I remember you as a stranger and honor you as a stranger? So this is something that I'm interested in terms of my
It's a,
practice. Like,
it's an interesting theory. I know that to be true, that clans and strangers they married a couple people so they could create alliances. But mostly what I'm familiar with is marriage within community. Like, let's keep our community where actually we knew exactly who those people were. We've been with them
right.
for the last couple of generations. Um, but the idea of, how do I keep this thing alive of just being curious?
Mhm.
And for one, that's a practice. I think all of us were probably curious as little kids, and some of us got the message of, "Hey, pay attention. Stop looking out the window. Pay attention. Enough questions. I don't want any more questions. I got to focus on this. I'm reading the paper, whatever it is." Right?
Mhm.
I think most of us were curious as kids. I mean, even the baby in the crib was like, "Oh, hand, how
Yeah.
cool." And I think we squeeze it out of some kids. So it's one is, how do we encourage curiosity, which I think is good for any relationship, right? To
Yeah. Yeah.
people, to friends meeting, whatever it is, to strangers meeting. Like, let's get curious about each other. Um, and the other is to prioritize it. There's so many couples who they prioritize whatever is kind of the emergency of the day, right? Getting the kids to school, going to work,
Yeah.
taking care of the heating system went out, whatever it is. Like, let's focus on that. And because we're married, I can rely on, well, I can just do that next week or the next week or the next week. That doesn't come. So there's a curiosity to stoke, and there is there's a prioritization. How does this become most important? And, you know, I have to play a little more with the idea of, how do we look at this person as a stranger? And if it is, then what does that do for our relationship? Because we want to feel at home with this person, right? We don't want completely to be a stranger. We don't want to wake up one day and say, "Who are you?" Right? That happens.
Yeah. But I would say that probably happens because I take her for granted. I actually think I know her when I don't. So to go back to something we brought up earlier about the couples that I saw in these workshops were paying to become a little uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Basically, we're paying money to learn how to see each other as a stranger and be in a place where it was safe to be curious about the stranger rather than running away hiding. So I
So
want to
I'm,
feel
I'm staying with
safe.
this. I'm staying with this word stranger still, though. Do you really want a stranger? Do you really want to see your partner as a stranger? Because I don't.
Well, I guess my experience, Ted, is that if I actually get past everything that I think I know about, any one of the women I've been with, there was there was a degree of taking for granted on my part who she was, and there was still so much to discover about her, and I wasn't interested in the discovery. And I think so. This is so I'm with you on the, yeah. I want to feel comfortable. I want to trust this person. I want to I want to feel comfortable. But at the same time, to feel that, to really feel this, I mean, we could walk around. What does it mean to love somebody? Sometimes there's this feeling of like the flower all of a sudden opening, and it's like, wow, like I am totally blown away, and just I don't know what agape or something. That's just overwhelming, you know,
Right.
spiritual experience, or there's this experience of like looking across the room and going, just feeling really warm and like, yeah, I really love you. And there's lots of different shades in there.
I guess I'm getting hung up with the word stranger
Yeah,
because stranger in my lineage really denotes someone who doesn't belong here.
yeah.
And
So
that I don't want them to feel like they don't belong here. Right? To be a stranger in a strange land is the biblical reference.
yeah,
And that's the last thing that
but
would
this is what I like about this story is like, oh, that he tells is there there is a stranger, and then we go through a ritual or a ceremony where we invite that stranger in. But there is a threshold crossing, and that threshold can always like, I guess what I'm interested in is, and this goes back to the the kind of practices to revive polarity or to stir that up again. Those are probably always about making the other strange in a little way, or recognizing that they're not who I think I am, and that mystery is actually what's exciting. I had a
Mm.
woman, a woman who worked with men and around sexuality, talk about she wanted the men she worked with to think of the women they were with as islands to be discovered. So yeah, I'm really familiar with the port city and the outlying area, but there's like so much more of this island. But most of the time, I just couldn't be bothered because I'd
Mm.
rather be working on my business or playing golf or going fishing or something. And on her side, and I saw this a lot in those workshops, women who were yearning for their man to actually go exploring in her wilderness, in those places where she was not only strange but probably scary.
Mm.
So so sometimes when I think about the wedding ceremony, it's not only a commitment to I will, be with you through sickness and health and all this stuff. I will actually be with you and explore your dark and mysterious and scary places with you. Like it isn't just when you're sick, it's when you're in a rage or when you're throwing dishes or when like when you're in those places where I think you're fucking crazy and I'm not going to run away. I mean, maybe at some point it's time to go away if it just keeps happening, for
It-
sure.
Clearly,
But
there's a point. Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that we're, I think, scared to. As soon as a stranger shows up, we're just like, I'm out of here, rather than, oh, here's a stranger. How do I bring out the best table setting? How
Yeah.
do I welcome this strangeness and discover something about them and myself in
Yeah.
that?
We have I think we have certainly the current generation
Mm-hmm.
is averse to averse to discomfort. We can see that in a lot of places.
Yeah, I see it in my own life.
Yeah.
I'm aware of like, oh, I'm making this choice because
I'm uncomfortable. Yeah.
yeah, or this
And
is
even advertising wouldn't exist
yeah,
if there wasn't this natural inclination to push away from some kind of discomfort. And one of the scariest places to go is inside someone else's emotions. And so one of the important things to learn along the way is how can I be a yes to them? Now I don't need to be a punching bag,
mhm,
right? But how can I be a yes to their experience? How can I make boundaries? How can I draw, say, hey, this is okay, this is not okay. But how can I be a yes to that deep part of them? And I think what your guest you said was saying prior is that, she wants people who are going to be a yes, right? To explore and to keep looking. And I think for many of us, that's a scary place.
yeah,
I don't want to be a yes to my own feelings. Therefore, how can I be a yes to someone else's feeling? That's a very common part.
yeah,
But I don't want to go into that space because that looks difficult. So how do we retrain our bodies, our nervous system, so that we can show up, so that you can be mad, sad, glad, in your shame and your fear, whatever it is, and I can be a yes to it. 'Cause there's something beautiful in that, right?
Yeah, yeah. For me, that's that. Like so that fall when I first met you, and I did those two back to back with John, and I subsequently did a number of online things
Mhm.
with him. But at the same time, I was also doing my Kundalini yoga teacher training. So
Mhm.
it was, I look at that, and as I was going through it, I was aware, like, oh, I'm learning how my nervous system is being trained here.
Mhm.
I am learning some basic skills on how to sit with discomfort and not run away. So when I talk to people who are married and are wanting to run away, mostly what I want to say to them is like let's develop let's help you develop some skills so you don't feel so freaked out. So you don't go into fight, flight, freeze response, right?
Yeah.
And and then start looking at some of this hard stuff as actually this is the good stuff. Like this is going to take you to a good place. This could actually show you a beautiful part of yourself and the other person. But like you said, there's the tolerance for this, and there's a whole lot of ways that we write off other people that we're having difficulty with, and so again, I'm really curious about over time how your experience wedding people, like marrying people, and how that may have changed, and specifically again. So again, a lot of what I hear from her, I hear, well, I'm just not interested in having sex with him anymore, and he's like, I don't know what's happened. Like we were having lots of sex, we had a great relationship, partly because we were having lots of sex, and now there's nothing. And what do I do? How do I do this? And she's in the same place. But she's really clear that there's just no interest. Now, to me, that in the people that I've worked with, that typically shows up, 3 to 5, 7 years, somewhere in there. There'll be this place of the dead zone, and most people don't want to. They'll hang out for a while, but they don't want to do too much about it because what they have to do is explore that part of the island, who the stranger that's in front of them, and they don't want to do that.
Right. So, so over the years, one thing that's changed for me in wedding prep is really addressing some of these issues,
Mm-hmm.
um, poking them a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And where I used to just kind of, saw some things, or thought I saw some things, and when I was in my 20s, I just kind of let them go,
Yeah.
and now really poking a little bit, like, oh,
And
here's
how
what I'm
and
seeing.
how are
Here's
those pokes received?
um, sometimes they hurt a little bit, and generally received very well, but sometimes they hurt a little bit because sometimes people don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. But one of the biggest things that they don't want to hear is you created this relationship. How can each of you take 100% responsibility for this relationship? Now, I
Yeah.
know mathematically that doesn't work, but if we can get each person into the radical um, the radical ownership. I created this exactly as it is. I created this relationship where we never have sex. I created this relationship where she doesn't want anything to do with me. I created this relationship where I don't trust him. When we can get to that place, which is not easy, then we can really make headway.
Mm.
When we get out of the blame. So I was talking to someone about this today who was, kind of laying this on her husband. I said, okay, well, where is he right in his complaint? Where is he right? And that's hard. Fine, let me think. And they always do. They always figure it out. But sometimes they need a third person, someone else, to point it out to them and say, "Yeah, I get it. I get it that this doesn't feel good. I get it. This is not the life you want to be living. And where is she right? Where is he right? And how did you create this?" And then we can start unpacking. And often what happens is, yeah, we neglected each other. Not that we were mean to each other, not that we were, active neglect, more just passive. We forgot that relationships take attention and intention. That without those two things, they wither on the vine or they explode. I've never actually met a couple, a long-term happy couple that says we got here by doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta keep watering the plants.
So when you're working with couples, do you give them practices, or is it just talking?
No, no, we do practices,
Yeah.
and
So give me a couple of your favorite practices.
mm, well, some of the ones that you learned, years ago with us, it's just basic tantric practices of eye gaze and learning how to breathe with each other. But actually, my favorite one, I talk about this a lot, is praise.
Mm.
Let me praise you. So every night before I go to bed, sometimes during the day, like it'll just come up, but typically before my wife and I go to bed, I'll praise her. I want to praise you for um, how you showed up today when our daughter was falling apart. Or I want to praise you for something I saw you do with one of your clients. It doesn't have to be anything about me, or I want to just praise you for bringing joy into this family. And then, what else can I praise you for? And so that's interesting. It brings up something kind of triggering for some people. One is, I don't want to praise you. I'm mad at you, right? So I have to come up with something to praise you about. But the second thing is that when you ask me what I want to be praised for, I've got to dig something up without shame or guilt and say, this is what you saw or didn't see that I want to be praised for. And that's hard for some people. I want to be praised for, the beautiful job I did holding this couple today. I want to be praised for, putting so much love into this meal.
Mhm.
So there's that part, but then also the person who's praising, I want to be praised for this. Oh, I have to praise you for that? Is that praiseworthy? I mean, so or oh yeah, of course, like that's praiseworthy. So it brings up something in both parties, and it's a beautiful practice. I do it with my daughter too. You can really do it with anyone, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful way of bringing people together. It gets them into their thinking, but also gets them into the heart space.
Mm.
And we want to do, and I think what differentiates uh, you know, my practice and some others is that is that we really work on the embodied part of it. So we can think through all these things, right? But our nervous system still does different stories. So how do we soothe the other person's nervous system? Um, I see someone wrote here, you want to be acknowledged. I think praise is the wrong word. You're welcome to use whatever word you want. Praise really works for me. To me, acknowledge is just to note that it happened, to note that something is there. Praise is to find that space in my heart. To acknowledge actually is kind of easy. And this is maybe this is semantics. I don't know, Brandon. I don't know what you're talking about necessarily, and so just take this as my best shot at it. But to me, acknowledgement is just to notice that it's there, right? I acknowledge that there's a flower. Praise is to find that space of chesed, of loving kindness in me that says, that's that's something I want to praise.
Yeah.
So it it has for me a greater depth, and you know nothing wrong with acknowledging someone. All of us need that too. This to me, it takes it to a different level when we're praising, and so these are some of the practices. I'll send people out on date nights.
Hmm.
And what I really like to do with all of these things is set them up as experiments.
Yeah.
So, I would like you to, hold each other belly to belly for 5 minutes every day for a week. If I said to, do it, I want you to hold your partner belly to belly for 5 minutes every day forever. Like, oh, that's kind of daunting. But for a week, I could do it. And then at the end of the week, let's evaluate it. Like, oh, this is actually really cool. Like, it really drew us together, or you know, it's fine, or it's icky, or whatever it could be. Like, you get some chance to go back into it and decide whether this is what we want to keep doing. But I like to give my clients and my couples some kind of practices so they start to move their bodies in ways that align with their relationship.
Or where they want their relationship to be. And that's like there's the I'm saying I want a certain kind of intimacy. I'm saying I want more from the other, but I don't actually know how, how to how to do that without well, the words are one thing, but like you said, like so you've got to practice. So even the praise practice, which is a word, like as you said, it's a word practice. It's up here. I mean, you introduced this to me several years ago, and and I did it with a friend of mine, and it was scary as shit,
Mm,
and it was so amazing. But it had to do with what you like the praise thing. It wasn't just saying I see you doing a good job. It was or I see you doing this job. It was like I see you doing a great job, or I see you doing this in a way that feels really good to me. And I mean, I'm pretty liberal with saying good things to my friends, but to actually stand in front of them face to face and then to praise them and then to ask to be praised for something like the level of vulnerability. It isn't just I want you to acknowledge that I do this. It's like I want you to praise me for something that I value, and then maybe you don't.
yeah, yeah. And
So
that's not okay.
listen,
Society says that's not okay, but it actually is. It's
well,
actually
it's
great.
it's also it's like it's choosing to be in a ritual way, choosing vulnerability and just practicing that.
Yeah.
And that to me is, I'll keep bringing up the stranger thing. It's like that's the place where I'm actually a bit strange to myself. Like if I get to a place where I'm vulnerable, all of a sudden, like I know this person who's feeling vulnerable, but it's also I don't know him that well, and I don't know how much I want to hang out with him.
Right.
So again, to bring this around to like men and women talking about sex and love, my experience with women directly, but also in conversation is when she can when she can feel my vulnerability and then I'm actually able to hold myself in that vulnerability, she relaxes and she opens. And then I get to experience her vulnerability and a part of her strangeness, and it's beautiful. It's not scary.
Yeah.
Um, so to go back to these, because I haven't I haven't had very much experience, but I think about the weddings that I want to be part of are, as this teacher said, ceremonies that change the world. Like I want to work with people who, okay, I'm not just stepping across a threshold because it's the thing to do. I want to go through something with them so they're like, whoa, like I am broken open and I'm ready to go through more heartbreak, but with this person and to do it together. And that to me and the feedback I get, particularly from women, is like that's incredibly sexy. Like that really charges the polarity, but it's not something I or any man could do for 24/7. It's like you said, okay, hold your bellies together for 5 minutes a day for a week. Don't do it 24/7 because things that'll change too.
Yeah, it will. But if you can commit to really being present for each other, whether it's any of these practices or some other
Yeah.
practices, if you can really commit to you just having a meal where you're really with each other, you're not like you look at your phone or the clock on the wall or something like that. Um, that will feed your relationship, but so many of us are not. Like, we're not actually here. We're here, but we're not here. Um, when arguments come up over and over and over again, it's often because someone doesn't feel heard. Like, yeah, you said you were listening and you appeared to be listening, but I don't feel seen or heard or whatever. That's a lot of tension that we have in relationships. So if we can start practicing some of these things, just so we can really create this this baseline for this is what it feels like when we're really present with each other, that will serve us. Yes, it'll serve us. It'll serve our kids. It'll serve our community. And I think that this this place of being together. I said, for one, we all have this yearning to be together, but the polarity comes from when we're a little bit separate. There's always going to be this tension of wanting to be one and needing to be separate, wanting to be one, needing to be separate. And it's a natural thing. And so I think just recognizing that, oh, it's not that, people talk about their relationships kind of going ups and downs and ups and downs. And I think that's actually what's happening. They're becoming really close and then we're becoming really far, really close and really far. Some people will. Some people far and far and far and far. But back and forth is sometimes that that wave that people are riding. And there's that natural inclination to be one. But if we're aware enough about it, we recognize, oh, let's let's differentiate a little bit also. You need your hobbies, I need my hobbies. You need your friends, I need my friends. You need, your boundaries. I need to understand your boundaries. Um, that serves that serves in the long run for many people, for most couples.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Ted.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Um, yeah, I always enjoy my conversations with you. It's a treat to see you again. And,
It's always a pleasure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so
take
much.
care.
Have a good night. Bye.
And for everybody who's listening here, I'll put the contact information for Ted in the notes and stuff. Um, Ted teaches courses. He leads retreats. He's quite active. And as I said, I always enjoy my time with him.
Thank you. My
Bye
pleasure.
bye.
Let's do it again. So long.